This entitled mum never offers to have family dinners at her house, so when she eagerly puts up her hand, the rest of the family have become awfully suspicious. What does this EM have secretly planned? This is one family dinner that's going to end in disaster. Happy birthday, today's your birthday, and on with the revamped show. I could make a book of posts about my entitled mother, but this one seems the most appropriate to frame how out of control she is. This story takes place at a dinner that one side of my family used to have on the weekly. A good portion of them were there, but the key players are my entitled mother, EM, my middle sister, MS, her child, nephew, my older sister, OS, and myself. We were getting together for dinner, which involves one of the adults picking a house to have it at and preparing the meal for everyone else, usually with help from those who arrive early. This time was odd in the fact that my mother insisted on having it at her house. She never hosted. My step-grandparents or MS usually did. My mother's house was way too small for everyone, and an inconvenient drive away for most. I was 15 around this time, living with EM. My sisters were in their mid to late 20s and lived on their own, married and starting families. I don't remember my nephew's age, but he was really young. Just sitting up with marginal success young, but old enough to hold up his own head. My MS arrived with nephew early to help EM prepare for family dinner. I was already working on something in the kitchen, so EM offered to watch nephew while MS helped in the kitchen. MS was confused, having brought a playpen and mat for nephew, as EM had insisted she come help early because she really needed the extra hands. If EM was babysitting, then there wasn't extra hands. MS pointed this out to EM, who pouted about not being able to see her grandchild. EM had plenty of opportunities to see her grandchild, and she hadn't, making excuses, so this whole situation really made MS mad. They went back and forth for a bit about it before MS let it go and just let her play with nephew, taking over in the kitchen for EM. EM soon made her way to the kitchen, micromanaging little things both me and my sister were doing, going back into the living room where nephew was occasionally, when MS would passively berate her about not helping. This went on for almost all of the prep work for food. When close to the end, we noticed EM had been suspiciously silent for a while. MS went to check on nephew and found EM holding him in one arm while she smoked with the other, blowing it right into his face. Unintentionally, but still. They both got into a big argument that ended up with my mum tearing up and saying that MS didn't understand her, the typical response, and she hid in her room until the rest of the family arrived, leaving MS and I to finish cooking the food alone while also checking on nephew. MS asked me not to mention what happened with EM unless it came up, for several reasons, but mostly because EM fed off the drama and she wanted the family to enjoy dinner that most had inconveniently drove to have. Everyone arrived, EM came out, everyone found seats in the cramped space, and we started to eat. My mum had insisted on sitting next to nephew and frequently got up to go into the kitchen and do things during dinner. Most of the family ignored her because she often did odd or annoying things. She kept asking MS if she could feed him some of the food that had been made, and MS told her no, he was too small and still on breast milk. Everyone at the table looked at EM like she was insane when she asked the first time, and as she continued to ask, various people would pipe up that MS said no. EM disappears into the kitchen again, and after a few minutes returns, hiding something under the table. After another minute, she pulls out a tiny container and a metal spoon and quickly scoops up a bite and shoves it into nephew's mouth. I was the only one paying attention, and I said something like, "Mum, what are you doing?" But it was too late to stop, so everyone looked over just in time to see her pull the spoon from nephew's mouth and watch as he started to choke and gag on food, chunks of cut up chicken and macaroni salad falling from his mouth. Please note that he had never eaten solid foods before and he wasn't ready for them. Allergies and choking were a huge concern. MS pulled him from his high chair. It had one of those sit-up helpers, so this took a hot minute, as she was also trying to pull everything out of his mouth with her fingers, and was fully focused on him. So she didn't say anything to my mum at this point. Insert older sister. OS had cut EM off a long time ago for other things and didn't speak with her at dinners if she could help it. OS went off on EM, telling her she was a horrible mother and an even worse grandmother, a terrible person, and toxic, airing all the old laundry she had experienced or heard from other family. Some people tried to cool it down, but nothing worked. So mostly the table was silent or helping MS, while EM made excuses for herself and OS kept berating her. EM tried to make a dramatic exit back to her room, and MS stopped her and asked her why she would think it would be okay to do that. EM said, "I just wanted to have something with my grandchild. You never let me do things with him, and you yelled at me earlier for smoking with him. I just wanted one good thing." And MS said a lot in return, but the summary was that EM violated her trust, disregarded her wishes, and took his first feeding from her, all while putting his best interests and health at risk. She would no longer be able to spend time with him unsupervised, and if she tried anything again, she would lose him in her life. EM started wailing and pushing MS, still holding nephew, out of the way to run to her room, and everyone decided then and there that dinner was over and that it would be best to leave. They left. I started cleaning up when my dad got home and helped. He worked late and missed everything. EM heard him talking to me and rushes in, explaining in tears how the family didn't understand where she was coming from and how unfair it all was, and actually asked my dad if she could call and demand an apology from my sisters for saying and doing what they did. My dad, not knowing the full story, pled the fifth and told her she needed to talk it out with them, not ask for an apology. She asked for one and whines about it a lot, still does to this day. Family dinners dissolved, and MS kept true to her word. EM only has limited visitation with him. He's 6 now, with a younger sister, and OS also has kids, all 4 of which EM complains about not seeing, but doesn't make any effort to stay in contact with. She's seen the younger kids, all 4 or younger, less than a handful of times, quite literally. I had to retake the line so many times where she said, "And you yelled at me earlier for smoking with him." I don't understand how she can't see, like, why would you yell at me for that? I was just blowing smoke into his young innocent face and lungs. What I want to know is, how did her children survive long enough so that they could then reproduce themselves? Is she just the luckiest person ever? Or is she just that bit older and a bit more senile and kind of forgotten what it's like? I don't really understand the boomer generation when they're like, yeah, everyone's a bit too soft these days. Back in my day, no one wore seatbelts and we all smoked. Yeah, and the fatality rate was a lot higher too. I know things change from generation to generation. Like, when we become the grandparents, there are gonna be things that we complain about, like probably that we ate too much sugary food or something like that, right? Well, back in my day, I could eat a triple quarter pounder and you didn't have anyone complaining about that. Just for the record, I've never had a triple quarter pounder, just a double quarter pounder. So this happened about 5 years ago at the company where I work, Fortune 500, so it's a big company. We have a great internship program that lasts 6 months and covers 1 semester plus part of the summer in the first and second part of the year. As internships go in our area, it pays well, has actual benefits available, and even allows for a couple vacation personal sick days. We expect the interns to actually work and give them meaningful work that goes along with their degrees, like redesigning a logistics network and presenting the savings project to a GM, or installing new manufacturing equipment, or developing a marketing effort and directing the advertising efforts. Needless to say, it's competitive to get into. Don't worry, this is going somewhere. We suck at the intern hiring process. While other hiring recruiters are actually hiring the interns, often on the spot, ours are collecting resumes from multiple colleges. They then hand carry all resumes with them while they tour other colleges and bring the whole pile back to the office, where they get sorted and hand-delivered to each of the appropriate managers, along with all the appropriate internet applications. Sometimes in the next few weeks, the managers will go over them and select the ones they want to interview, and then we start the interview process. Meanwhile, the applicants are busy accepting offers from other companies, and it turns into us calling each applicant in turn to see who's still available. I'm not actually sure how, but we actually managed to get some really good interns, most of the time. We get some interesting characters in there. The next two examples are just strange things interns have done, not entitled parents. The first one we worked with. The second one was hopelessly unprepared for life and had a serious attachment problem. One kept asking to leave early. She was willing to come in early to offset it. We finally found out she was leaving early so she could get the early shift at a local theater. She almost quit the internship to work there. One needed help mailing a letter. I showed him how to address it and told him to put it in the mailbox. A couple days later, he told me the mail lady wouldn't take it. A little probing later, and I learned he never put a stamp on it. Curious, I asked who he was mailing. His parents. I was about to leave when he told me he forgot his email password and was mailing his parents to ask what the password was. Edit, he also asked us how to get his electricity and water turned on again. Turns out he just threw the bills away because he saw his parents bring in mail and just throws it in the trash, the junk mail. So he'd never opened a letter unless his parents gave it to him. He was showering at the gym for about a month and buying gallons of water at the store. The only reason he said anything to us is because it was getting hotter and muggy and he was uncomfortable. Back to the entitled parent. One intern showed up on the first day with his mum, or rather, his mum showed up with him along. My boss was the program manager, and it was my job to manage the interns, teach them the basic roles, introduce them to people they needed for work, and help them find an interesting project they could finish for a finite period. My boss goes down to the lobby to get the new interns for my area, and he walks back off the elevator and past my desk with a giant eye roll. Mum and son behind him. They walk into his office and I can hear them start talking until the mum starts talking over him. At this point, I just swivel and make eye contact through the glass wall. The mum is ticking off her list of requirements for her son. Things like required weekly check-ins with VPs, a monthly meeting with the CEO, an executive mentor, a manager to coach him daily, a supportive environment, flexible work hours so he can have a good work-life balance. The list went on and on. I'll give her this. She was prepared. My boss's eyebrows just kept climbing his forehead with each new requirement. Partway through, my boss breaks in and says he's going to get the son's manager because he should definitely hear this so the lady doesn't have to repeat it. Cue evil smile from my boss to me. Gulp. Before I get in the door, the lady's voice is climbing, asking my boss why he won't personally manage her son, and then demanding it. At this point, he's fed up and tells her she needs to be quiet. He introduces me, making sure to point out that I am a manager as well. I just report to him. Now she's indignant and asks how I will have time for her son if I'm managing other employees. Next, she asks what college I went to and is none too impressed with my alma mater. Admittedly, it's not a well-known college, but I got my degree while in the military. I get a humph from her. My boss breaks in and lets her know I'm sufficiently competent. She's still looking down her nose and asks if I really think I can juggle my responsibilities and make sure her son is properly attended to, and do I have much experience with this sort of thing. At this point, I'm tired of playing nice. I tell her for the first 12 years of my professional life, I turned boys into men so they could make truly important decisions, life or death decisions, daily decisions involving millions of dollars. As far as juggling responsibilities, if I could hold a dressing in place, call in a medivac, and direct artillery fire, I can probably make sure her son can navigate corporate office life. 12 years in the Marines. Full disclosure, I never did all of those things outside of training, and I'm darn glad I didn't have to. I generally play up the nice guy, but the reality is I can be a scary bastard, and I've had a lot of practice. My boss is choking trying to keep a straight face, and the mum is sitting down again, thankfully, quiet. Her son is looking at something beside the floor. My boss is grabbing the mum and asking if she'd like coffee and a tour. He pokes his head back in the door and tells me to find out if the son actually wants to be here or if we can just cut him loose. I sit down with the guy and he's a decent sort. He doesn't really know what he wants to do. I tell him he's welcome to stay and see how he likes supply chain management, and no hard feelings if he doesn't. He decides to stay and I tell him he'll work hard and he'll have good support to do it, but none of the things his mum demanded. He's fine with this and looks embarrassed. I do tell him that the first thing he has to do is tell his mum she can't come to work with him every day. She was renting an apartment with him and planning on checking in daily to see that her son was treated the way she wanted him to be. I didn't mean for him to do it immediately in front of us, but I didn't specify, and he, no kidding, confronts her when she comes through the door to the office again later and tells her he wants her to go home and not live with him. She's alternating between shock and shooting angry glances at me. My boss suggests they finish the conversation at home, or basically anywhere else. They walk out with her almost in tears, and he shows up again 10 minutes later, looking very sheepish, and says he sent her home. He admits he has no idea what to do next, but he'll try whatever we ask him to do, and he's really sorry about his mum. Turns out the mum recognized the recruiter on her tour, and we found out later she's taken him to the interview too, and filled out his application. Needless to say, he had a knack for supply chain. We worked hard on him because he tried hard. It was the first thing he'd ever done on his own. We did introduce him to several VPs who worked out of our office, mostly because they wanted to meet him and see if we were telling the truth about him. So the mum sort of got what she wanted. One day, the GM of one of our businesses shows up in my boss's office, and they call me in there. He's looking embarrassed and wants to make sure we didn't hire the guy on his behalf. We're a little confused and tell him no. Turns out he knows the parents very casually, not well at all. The mum was throwing the GM's name around socially and telling their friends that he got her son an important job. Through the next 6 months, the son told me he wanted to join the army. I tried to sell him on the Marines, but he was set because that's what his favorite uncle did. I convinced him not to drop out like I did and enlist, but to get into his college's army ROTC and go the officer route. He did after his internship and became a logistics officer after he graduated. My former boss and I keep tabs on him, and he's doing well. I never saw the mum again. Now, I'm positive that mums like that mean well, at least to some degree. I'm sure there's a selfish element in there somewhere where they're afraid their son will fail. But if you really want your children to command respect from others around them, they can't just have their mummy holding their hands as they go into the job. Everybody needs to go through this experience themselves at their own pacing, that's true. At some point we make the break away from our parents and we live our own independent life, but it has to come from within. It has to be an internal motivation that you decide, no, I'm gonna do things my own way and I'm gonna start standing up for myself. The sort of behavior the mum was showing was like when they send their kids to the first day of school and they're like pandering all over the child because, you know, it's not that unreasonable at that point in life. So I'm glad that in the end he stood up for himself because it could have ended a lot worse than that. Submit your story to be read on the channel at VoiceyHereStories@gmail.com and join our Voicey veteran community at r/VoiceyHere. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. Alright, Voicey veterans, I'll see you in the next one.